In the harsh territory of Silverbend, Lena Whitaker's limp never stopped her from answering calls for help. When word reaches her about the dying owner of Cade Ranch, she expects another brief chapter as a caretaker bride. Graham Cade, once the most powerful rancher in the territory, now lies in his bed, his legendary wealth meaning nothing in the face of death. She arrives to find a man others had given up for dead, but as she tends to his failing body with gentle determination, something remarkable happens. Under her care, Graham begins to fight back against the illness that's plagued him. Day by day, his strength returns, and with it, a connection neither of them expected. But as Graham recovers, rumors spread through town. Did the limping bride save him, or is she after his fortune? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The leather-bound medical journal lay open on Lena's worn oak table, its pages filled with careful notes spanning 7 years of tending to the dying. Her fingertips traced over the latest entry, recipes for willowbark tea, measurements for feverfew tinctures, and detailed observations of symptoms she'd learned to recognize. Each page held memories of men she'd helped ease into their final rest, their names written in her steady hand: Thomas Wheeler, age 78, consumption; Marcus Fleming, age 82, heart failure; Samuel Reed, age 85, pneumonia. She packed the journal carefully into her carpet bag, along with her collection of dried herbs and bandages. The telegram that had arrived that morning lay beside her other. Supplies, its message brief but urgent: seeking bride for Graham Cade, terminal condition, compensation generous, immediate response required. The mirror caught her reflection as she moved about her small room, a woman of 32 with careful movements that spoke of her lifelong companion. The twisted leg that had earned her as many pitying glances as it had grateful ones. The accident that broke her leg at 12 had shaped her path, teaching her early that some kinds of healing went deeper than bone. Another dying rancher, Martha, her landlady, had said when Lena shared the news. Though this one's got more land than most, Cade Ranch stretches clear to the horizon, they say. She'd hesitated, then added more gently, "You don't have to keep doing this, Lena. There are other ways to make a living." But they both knew there weren't, not really. Not for a woman with a limp in a town where marriage prospects were measured by how well a wife could work the land. Instead, Lena had found her calling in these final marriages, unions of mercy rather than love, where her gentle hands and quiet strength brought dignity to life's last chapter. She'd heard whispers about Graham Cade over the years. His wealth was legendary, his grief equally so. After his wife's death 15 years ago, he'd withdrawn from society, letting his ranch hands manage his vast holdings while he retreated into isolation. Now, with death apparently approaching, he sought what so many before him had, a caretaker bride to ease his passing. The stagecoach would arrive at dawn. Lena secured her medical supplies, packed her modest clothes, and added one final item, a small bottle of lavender oil, its scent a comfort to the dying. Her leg ached with the promise of rain, but she'd learned long ago to work through discomfort. As she closed her carpet bag, her fingers brushed against the rough leather of her journal. Within its pages lay the stories of men who'd started as strangers and died as friends, each teaching her something about the art of gentle passage. Graham Cade would be another such story, another chapter in her journal of endings, or so she thought. Outside, thunder rumbled across the prairie, and Lena found herself wondering what sort of man would wait until the very end to seek companionship, even if only for dying. Tomorrow, she would begin to learn the answer. Cade Ranch emerged from the morning mist like a painting half-finished, its edges blurred by distance and dawn light. The main house stood proud against the backdrop of rolling hills, a two-story testament to success built in stone and timber. But as the wagon drew closer, Lena noticed the signs of neglect: weather-worn paint, untrimmed bushes, empty flower beds that spoke of years without a woman's touch. The ranch hand who'd met her at the station, a weathered man named Cooper, pulled the wagon to a stop before the broad front steps. "Property deed says it's 20,000 acres, he offered quietly, noting her wide-eyed assessment. "Stretch as far as you can see in every direction. Mr. Cade hasn't surveyed it himself in near 15 years, though." A stout Mexican woman appeared at the door before Lena could respond. "You must be Miss Whitaker. I'm Mrs. Torres, the housekeeper." Her dark eyes carried a mixture of relief and worry. "We've been waiting for you. He's had a bad morning." Lena gathered her carpet bag, her leg stiff from the long ride. Mrs. Torres watched her careful movements with a flash of concern, but Lena had long since learned to navigate such moments with quiet dignity. "Tell me about his symptoms," she said, following the housekeeper inside. The interior of the house told its own story of gradual decline. Fine furniture lay draped in dust covers, precious rugs rolled and stored against walls. The massive stone fireplace held cold ashes, and the air carried the heavy stillness of rooms too long unused. "Fever comes and goes," Mrs. Torres explained, as they climbed the stairs, matching her pace to Lena's measured steps. "He won't eat proper meals anymore. Dr. Simmons says it's consumption, but—" She hesitated. "Sometimes I wonder if it's not his body failing so much as his will to live." They paused outside a heavy oak door. "The lawyer brought papers yesterday. Marriage. License, property arrangements. Mr. Cade signed them all without reading." Mrs. Torres's voice dropped lower. "He thinks he's dying, Miss Whitaker. Everyone does. But maybe what he really needs is someone to show him how to live again." Lena absorbed this, her hand tightening on her medical journal. She'd heard similar hopes from other housekeepers, other friends. They always wanted a miracle. She'd learned to promise nothing but comfort. The bedroom was dark despite the morning hour, heavy curtains drawn against the light. The massive four-poster bed dominated the space, its occupant little more than a shadow among the blankets. The air held the familiar staleness of a sick room too long closed off from the world. "Mr. Cade," Mrs. Torres called softly, "your bride has arrived." The figure in the bed stirred, and Lena got her first look at the man she'd come to tend in. His final days. Graham Cade had once been a powerful man. She could see it in the breadth of his shoulders, the strong line of his jaw beneath several days' growth of silver-streaked beard. Illness had worn him down, but hadn't yet erased the essence of who he'd been. His eyes, when they opened, were a startling blue against his pale face. Those eyes found her now, taking in her simple dress, her practical stance, the slight angle of her posture that betrayed her limp. She met his gaze steadily, having long ago learned that first moments often set the tone for all that followed. "So," he said, his voice rough from disuse, "you're to be my last wife." There was something in his tone, not quite bitterness, not quite humor. "They tell me you've experience in seeing men out of this world." "I have experience in caring for those who need it, Mr. Cade," Lena replied quietly. "Whether they're leaving this world or staying in it remains between them and God." A ghost of something, surprise perhaps, flickered across his face. He studied her a moment longer, then turned his face to the wall. "You'll find your room prepared down the hall. I'm tired now." Lena recognized dismissal when she heard it. But as she followed Mrs. Torres out, she noted things her experienced eye couldn't miss. The subtle labor of his breathing, the tension in his shoulders, the way his fingers gripped the blanket. This was not a man who had made peace with dying. This was a man at war with himself. Dawn found Lena already at work, organizing her supplies in Graham's sitting room. Her attention kept returning to the gold wedding band he wore, a smooth, heavy piece that spoke of wealth and permanence. It caught the morning light as he slept, a constant reminder of the woman who'd worn its mate. "He never takes it off," Mrs. Torres had whispered the night before, setting down a tray of broth Graham hadn't touched. 15 years, and he still reaches for her side of the bed some mornings. Lena understood ghosts. They lived in the spaces between heartbeats, in the silence after someone spoke, in the empty chairs at empty tables. But she'd learned that the living needed more attention than the dead. She opened the heavy curtains, letting sunlight stream across the floor for the first time in what must have been months. Graham stirred, his face tightening with annoyance. "Close them," he ordered, voice rough with sleep and irritation. "No," Lena replied simply, measuring herbs for her morning tea blend. "Your body needs sunlight to heal, Mr. Cade, as does your spirit." He turned to stare at her, clearly unused to defiance. "I hired you to ease my dying, not to lecture me on healing." "You hired me as your wife," she corrected, stirring honey into the tea. "And I didn't take those vows lightly, even if you did." She limped to his bedside, cup in hand. "Now, you can fight me and waste what strength you have, or you can drink this tea and begin to feel better. The choice is yours." Something flickered in his eyes, anger perhaps or surprise, but when she held out the cup, he took it. His hands shook slightly, and without comment, she steadied them with her own until he could manage. The next few days fell into a rhythm. Lena arrived at dawn, bringing tea and quiet determination. Graham resisted, but with less vigor each day. She read to him from the newspaper, keeping him connected to the world he'd abandoned. When he turned away, she read anyway, her voice steady and clear. "Why do you persist?" he asked on the fourth morning, watching her grind herbs with methodical precision. "I'm dying. Everyone knows it." Lena continued her work, not looking up. "My father used to say that everyone's dying, Mr. Cade. The real question is what we do while we're living." She paused, testing the texture of her herbs. "And, with respect, sir, I've seen death up close many times. It doesn't usually fight back the way you do," he snorted, but she caught the flash of interest in his expression. "Is that what you think I'm doing?" "Fighting, I think," she said carefully, measuring out her mixture, "that a man doesn't build an empire this size by giving up easily. And I think that somewhere under all this surrender, that man still exists." Graham's fingers worried at his wedding ring, a habit she'd noticed emerged when he was troubled. "Catherine, my wife, she loved this ranch, saw beauty in everything, even the hard years." His voice roughened. "After she died, none of it seemed to matter anymore." Lena set down her mortar and pestle, giving him her full attention. It was the first time he'd spoken of his wife voluntarily. "Tell me about her," she said softly. He did, haltingly at first, then with growing animation. Catherine's love of roses, her habit of singing while she worked, her dreams for the ranch. With each word, color seemed to seep back into his face, as if remembering life helped him grasp at it. When he finally fell silent, exhausted but somehow more present than she'd yet seen him, Lena stood carefully, gathering her supplies. "Tomorrow," she said, "if you're willing, we might try sitting in the chair by the window. The rose garden could use some attention, and you can tell me where Catherine's favorites grew." He started to refuse. She saw the automatic rejection form on his lips. But then he looked at his wedding ring, then at her, seeing perhaps for the first time not just a caretaker, but someone who understood that healing wasn't always about medicine. "Perhaps," he said finally, "if the weather's fair." It wasn't much, but Lena recognized it for what it was. The first crack in the walls he'd built around himself. As she made her way down the hall to her room, her leg aching from the long day, she found herself hoping, against all professional judgment, that Graham Cade might prove her most stubborn patient yet, because stubborn men, in her experience, were the ones who lived. The old photograph album lay heavy in Lena's lap, its leather binding cracked with age. She'd discovered it while airing out the library, a task Graham had dismissed as pointless until she'd reminded him that books, like people, needed fresh air to survive. "That was our first cattle drive," Graham said, his voice stronger than it had been in days. He sat in the armchair by the window, afternoon light catching the silver in his hair. 2 weeks of proper meals, and Lena's herbal treatments had begun to fill out his gaunt features. Catherine insisted on riding with us, refused to stay behind. The photograph showed a younger Graham, standing proud beside a striking woman with laughing eyes. Behind them stretched an endless sea of cattle, They looked invincible, untouchable by time or tragedy. She had spirit, Lena observed, studying. Catherine's confident pose, more than spirit, she had fire. Graham's hand trembled slightly as he touched the photograph. The day we met, she told me my fences were crooked and my cattle were underweight. Then she offered to help fix both problems. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. I married her 3 months later. Lena turned the page, revealing more moments. Frozen in time. Catherine in the rose garden. Graham and Catherine at cattle auctions. The ranch hands gathered for Christmas dinner. You built something beautiful together, she said softly, and I let it all go to seed. The bitterness in his voice was familiar, but today it carried something new, regret. She'd be ashamed to see it now. Then perhaps it's time to change that. Lena closed the album carefully. Mrs. Torres tells me the rose garden soil is still good. The bushes need pruning, but they're not dead, just sleeping. Graham's eyes met hers, sharp with sudden understanding. Like everything else around here? Some things only need the right care to bloom again. She stood carefully, balancing against her cane. The doctor says you're strong enough for short walks. We could start with the garden. He studied her for a long moment, taking in her steady gaze, the quiet strength in her stance despite her limp. You're not what I expected, he said finally. What did you expect? Someone who'd let me die in peace. Peace isn't the same as surrender, Mr. Cade. She moved to the window, looking out at the overgrown garden. And I think you've surrendered long enough. The silence stretched between them, heavy with possibility. Then Graham pushed himself up from his chair. His legs shook, but his jaw was set with determination she hadn't seen before. The red roses, he said, were Catherine's favorites. They'll need the most work. Then that's where we'll start. Lena offered her arm for support, carefully matching her pace to his uncertain steps. As they made their slow way toward the garden, she felt something shift between them, an understanding that went deeper than words. Mrs. Torres found them there an hour later, Graham pointing out where each variety had grown, while Lena took notes. In her journal, the housekeeper's eyes glistened as she hurried back to the kitchen, murmuring prayers of gratitude in Spanish. That evening, as Lena prepared Graham's medicine, she noticed him watching her with new awareness. Why did you really? Come here, he asked suddenly. You must have known what people would say. A young woman marrying a dying man of means. I came because I was needed, she answered simply. The same reason I went to all the others. But I stayed because I saw something in you worth fighting for, even when you couldn't see it yourself. Graham touched his wedding ring, a gesture that now seemed more thoughtful than grief-stricken. Catherine used to say that healing happens in its own time, that you couldn't force it, only prepare the way. She sounds like a wise woman. She was. He accepted the medicine without his usual reluctance. I think she would have liked you. Coming from Graham Cade, it was more than praise. It was permission to help him live again. Dr. Simmons's dismissive snort echoed through the bedroom as he read over his own previous diagnosis. Terminal consumption, the paper stated in bold, authoritative strokes. 6 months at most. Palliative care only recommended. He glanced at Graham, now sitting upright in his chair, then back at Lena with barely concealed skepticism. Whatever folk remedies you're using, Mrs. Cade, they're only prolonging the inevitable. False hope is a cruel thing to offer a dying man. Lena stood, her ground, her hand steady on her cane. With respect, Doctor, I see a man who's eaten 3 full meals today, whose fever has broken, and whose breathing has improved significantly. Those aren't signs of imminent death. They're temporary improvements at best. The doctor tucked his papers into his bag with sharp movements. I've seen it before, a rally before the final decline. Mr. Cade needs to put his affairs in order, not waste time with gardens and walks. Graham's voice cut through the tension, stronger than it had. Been in weeks. I believe I'm still capable of deciding how to spend what time I have left, Simmons. The doctor's face reddened. You're not thinking clearly, Graham. This woman, he gestured dismissively at Lena, she's got you believing in miracles. But science doesn't lie. The damage to your lungs can heal with proper care, Lena interrupted quietly. The body has remarkable powers of recovery when given the right support. My father proved that after his mining accident, when doctors like you told him he'd never walk again. A mining accident is hardly comparable to consumption. No, she agreed, moving to stand beside Graham's chair. But the will to live is the same in both cases, and I've yet to see any medical text that measures that. Graham's hand found hers, surprising them both with its strength. I think we're done here, Doctor. Send your bill to Cooper. After Simmons stormed out, Graham turned to Lena with a hint of his old humor. You enjoyed that. I enjoyed defending the truth, she corrected, but smiled slightly, though I won't deny some satisfaction in his expression when he saw you sitting up. He's not the only one who'll doubt, Graham warned. Word of my recovery will spread. Questions will be asked. Let them ask. Lena began preparing his afternoon. Tea with practiced movements. I've faced doubt before. It doesn't change what's real. Graham watched her work, his eyes thoughtful. Like the way people doubt you because of your leg? Her hand stilled briefly. Yes, though that taught me something valuable, that other people's limitations don't have to become our own. Is that what you think I've done? Accepted others' limitations? I think, she said carefully, that sometimes it's easier to believe we're dying than to face the challenge of living. She brought him the tea, their fingers brushing as he took the cup. But you're stronger than you know, Mr. Cade. Graham, he said suddenly, after all this, you might as well use my name. The moment hung between them, weighted with meaning. It was more than permission to use his given name. It was an acknowledgement of something shifting between them, something neither was quite ready to name. Later that evening, as Lena wrote in her medical journal, she added a note that had nothing to do with symptoms or treatments. Sometimes the greatest medicine is simply believing in someone until they remember how to believe in themselves. Outside her window, she could see the first rosebud beginning to form in the garden they'd started clearing together. Like Graham's recovery, it was small but undeniable, a testament to the persistence of life over death, of hope over surrender. Let the doctors doubt. She knew what she saw in Graham's eyes now, not the dim acceptance of a dying man, but the growing fire of someone remembering how to live. The morning brought rain, and with it, the familiar deep ache in Lena's leg that she'd learned to hide behind practiced smiles. Her cane slipped on the wet porch steps as she arrived, and only a quick grab at the railing prevented a fall. The pain flared sharp and insistent, but she straightened, took a breath, and pushed forward, as she always had. Graham was already awake, watching the rain from his chair by the window. A month of proper care had transformed him. His face had filled out, his eyes were clear and alert, and his breathing came easier. He turned at her entrance, then frowned. You're hurting. It's nothing, she said, moving to prepare his morning. Tea. Just the weather. Stop. His voice was gentle but firm. Sit down, Lena. She hesitated, unused to being the one cared for. Her cane, constant companion since childhood, suddenly felt conspicuous in her grip. Please, he added, softer now. You've spent weeks teaching me to accept help. Take your own advice. A small laugh escaped her. Using my own words against me? Learning from the best. He stood, steady now where once he'd wavered, and pulled out a chair. Tell me about it. The accident. She sank into the chair, relief washing through her leg even as uncertainty touched her heart. There's not much to tell. I was 12. A horse spooked, I fell badly, the bone never healed quite right. And yet you've built a life around helping others walk their difficult paths. He studied her face. Do you know what I see when I watch you move through your day? She looked away. Limitation, awkwardness, strength, he corrected. The kind that doesn't come from perfect health or easy circumstances. The kind that knows pain intimately and chooses to keep going anyway. Something warm and unexpected bloomed in her chest. Most men don't see it that way. Most men are fools. He moved to the tea service, his movements sure now where they'd once been shaky. My Catherine used to say that God puts angels in unlikely packages. I didn't understand what she meant until now. Lena watched as he prepared her tea, the same way she'd prepared his countless times. I'm no angel, Graham, just someone who found purpose in her pain. Perhaps that's what angels are. He handed her the cup, then sat across from her. You know, I've been thinking about the south pasture. It needs attention, new fencing, better grass management, things I've neglected far too long. She recognized his attempt to distract her from her discomfort and found herself touched by it. Planning for the future now, are you? Someone recently reminded me that life's for living. His eyes held hers. I'd value your opinion on the improvements. You see things others miss. Outside, the rain continued to fall, but inside, something was shifting. The professional distance Lena had always maintained with her patients was eroding, replaced by something both wonderful and terrifying. The ranch hands still look at me strangely, she said quietly. They think I'm either a miracle worker or a fortune hunter. Neither is true. What is true then? She touched her cane, this symbol of both limitation and perseverance. That sometimes the greatest healing happens when we stop seeing ourselves through others' eyes. You taught me that these past weeks. I did. Watching you remember who you are beneath all that grief and illness, it reminded me that we're more than our scars. She smiled slightly. Even if some of us lean on them more literally than others. Graham's laugh was unexpected and rich, filling the room with warmth. Well then, Mrs. Cade, shall we go scandalize the ranch hands by planning that south pasture renovation? After the rain stops, of course. After the rain stops, she agreed, sipping her tea and feeling for the first time in years truly seen. The rain drummed on, but neither seemed inclined to move. They had found something rare in that moment, a mutual understanding that went beyond caregiver and patient, beyond their marriage of convenience, something that felt surprisingly like home. Dr. Simmons' dismissive snort echoed through the bedroom as he read over his own previous diagnosis. Terminal consumption, the paper stated in bold, authoritative strokes. 6 months at most. Palliative care only recommended. He glanced at Graham, now sitting upright in his chair, then back at Lena with barely concealed skepticism. Whatever folk remedies you're using, Mrs. Cade, they're only prolonging the inevitable. False hope is a cruel thing to offer a dying man. Lena stood, her ground, her hand steady on her cane. With respect, doctor, I see a man who's eaten 3 full meals today, whose fever has broken, and whose breathing has improved significantly. Those aren't signs of imminent death. They're temporary improvements at best. The doctor tucked his papers into his bag with sharp movements. I've seen it before, a rally before the final decline. Mr. Cade needs to put his affairs in order, not waste time with gardens and walks. Graham's voice cut through the tension, stronger than it had. Been in weeks. I believe I'm still capable of deciding how to spend what time I have left, Simmons. The doctor's face reddened. You're not thinking clearly, Graham. This woman, he gestured dismissively at Lena, she's got you believing in miracles. But science doesn't lie. The damage to your lungs can heal with proper care, Lena interrupted quietly. The body has remarkable powers of recovery when given the right support. My father proved that after his mining accident, when doctors like you told him he'd never walk again. A mining accident is hardly comparable to consumption. No, she agreed, moving to stand beside Graham's chair. But the will to live is the same in both cases, and I've yet to see any medical text that measures that. Graham's hand found hers, surprising them both with its strength. I think we're done here, Doctor. Send your bill to Cooper. After Simmons stormed out, Graham turned to Lena with a hint of his old humor. You enjoyed that. I enjoyed defending the truth, she corrected, but smiled slightly. Though I won't deny some satisfaction in his expression when he saw you sitting up. He's not the only one who'll doubt, Graham warned. Word of my recovery will spread. Questions will be asked. Let them ask. Lena began preparing his afternoon. Tea with practiced movements. I've faced doubt before. It doesn't change what's real. Graham watched her work, his eyes thoughtful, like the way people doubt you because of your leg. Her hands stilled briefly. Yes, though that taught me something valuable, that other people's limitations don't have to become our own. Is that what you think I've done? Accepted others' limitations? I think, she said carefully, that sometimes it's easier to believe. We're dying than to face the challenge of living. She brought him the tea, their fingers brushing as he took the cup. But you're stronger than you know, Mr. Cade. Graham, he said suddenly. After all this, you might as well use my name. The moment hung between them, weighted with meaning. It was more than permission to use his given name. It was an acknowledgement of something shifting between them, something neither was quite ready to name. Later that evening, as Lena wrote in her medical journal, she added a note that had nothing to do with symptoms or treatments. Sometimes the greatest medicine is simply believing in someone until they remember how to believe in themselves. Outside her window, she could see the first rosebud beginning to form in the garden they'd started clearing together. Like Graham's recovery, it was small but undeniable, a testament to the persistence of life over death, of hope over surrender. Let the doctors doubt. She knew what she saw in Graham's eyes now, not the dim acceptance of a dying man, but the growing fire of someone remembering how to live. The morning brought rain, and with it, the familiar deep ache in Lena's leg that she'd learned to hide behind practiced smiles. Her cane slipped on the wet porch steps as she arrived, and only a quick grab at the railing prevented a fall. The pain flared sharp and insistent, but she straightened, took a breath, and pushed forward as she always had. Graham was already awake, watching the rain from his chair by the window. A month of proper care had transformed him. His face had filled out, his eyes were clear and alert, and his breathing came easier. He turned at her entrance, then frowned. "You're hurting." "It's nothing," she said, moving to prepare his morning. "Tea, just the weather." "Stop." His voice was gentle but firm. "Sit down, Lena." She hesitated, unused to being the one cared for. Her cane, constant companion since childhood, suddenly felt conspicuous in her grip. "Please," he added, softer now. "You've spent weeks teaching me to accept help. Take your own advice." A small laugh escaped her. "Using my own words against me? Learning from the best." He stood, steady now where once he'd wavered, and pulled out a chair. "Tell me about it, the accident." She sank into the chair, relief washing through her leg, even as uncertainty touched her heart. "There's not much to tell. I was 12. Horse spooked, I fell badly. The bone never healed quite right. And yet you've built a life around helping others walk their difficult paths." He studied her face. "Do you know what I see when I watch you move through your day?" She looked away. "Limitation, awkwardness, strength," he corrected. "The kind that doesn't come from perfect health or easy circumstances. The kind that knows pain intimately and chooses to keep going anyway." Something warm and unexpected bloomed in her chest. Most men don't see it that way. Most men are fools. He moved to the tea service, his movements sure now where they'd once been shaky. "My Catherine used to say that God puts angels in unlikely packages." I didn't understand what she meant until now. Lena watched as he prepared her tea, the same way she'd prepared his countless times. "I'm no angel, Graham. Just someone who found purpose in her pain. Perhaps that's what angels are." He handed her the cup, then sat across from her. "You know, I've been thinking about the south pasture. It needs attention, new fencing, better grass management. Things I've neglected far too long." She recognized his attempt to distract her from her discomfort and found herself touched by it. "Planning for the future now, are you? Someone recently reminded me that life's for living." His eyes held hers. "I'd value your opinion on the improvements. You see things others miss." Outside, the rain continued to fall, but inside, something was shifting. The professional distance Lena had always maintained with her patients was eroding, replaced by something both wonderful and terrifying. "The ranch hands still look at me strangely," she said quietly. "They think I'm either a miracle worker or a fortune hunter. Neither is true. What is true then?" She touched her cane, this symbol of both limitation and perseverance, that sometimes the greatest healing happens when we stop seeing ourselves through others' eyes. "You taught me that these past weeks." "I did? Watching you remember who you are beneath all that grief and illness. It reminded me that we're more than our scars." She smiled slightly. "Even if some of us lean on them more literally than others." Graham's laugh was unexpected and rich, filling the room with warmth. "Oh, well then, Mrs. Cade, shall we go scandalize the ranch hands by planning that south pasture renovation? After the rain stops, of course." "After the rain stops," she agreed, sipping her tea and feeling for the first time in years truly seen. The rain drummed on, but neither seemed inclined to move. They had found something rare in that moment, a mutual understanding that went beyond caregiver and patient, beyond their marriage of convenience. Something that felt surprisingly like home. In the bottom drawer of Graham's desk, beneath years of accumulated papers, lay a stack of letters he'd never sent. Written during his darkest days, they spoke of loneliness, of regret, and increasingly, of a different kind of healing than he'd expected to find. "My dearest Catherine," the most recent one read, "I thought I knew what it meant to die, but she's teaching me what it means to live again. Her hands are gentle, but her spirit is steel. When she looks at me, she sees not what I've lost, but what I might become. I find myself wanting to be the man she believes I am. Is this betrayal? Or is it the gift you always said would come when I finally opened my heart again?" Graham closed the drawer quickly as Lena entered the study, her face flushed with triumph. "Bradley's clerk was more than helpful," she said, laying out several papers, "especially when I mentioned how concerned I was about certain discrepancies in the accounts." "You're remarkable," he said softly, watching her organize the evidence. "Of Bradley's theft." She glanced up, caught something in his expression that made her pause. "Graham, I've been thinking about what you said yesterday, about choosing this, choosing me, before you knew about any of this." He gestured to the papers between them. "Why did you stay? After I started recovering, you could have left. Found someone who actually needed your care." Lena sat carefully in the chair across from him, her fingers absently tracing the pattern on her cane. "Do you remember the day you first walked to the rose garden?" He nodded. "You were weak, angry at needing support. But when you saw those withered bushes, something changed. You didn't see what they were, but what they could be again. You started planning their revival before you'd even caught your breath." She smiled slightly. "That's when I knew." "Knew what?" "That you were someone worth choosing, not because you were dying or wealthy or needed me, but because even in your darkest moment you could still see the possibility of beauty." Graham's hand moved across the desk, covering hers. "I see it now more clearly than ever." The moment hung between them, full of unspoken words. Then Lena turned her hand in his, their fingers intertwining. "When I first came here," she said quietly, "I thought I was strong because I could face death without flinching. But you've taught me that real strength is daring to embrace life, even when it terrifies you." "Does it terrify you?" "Less each day." She met his eyes. "Especially when you look at me like that." "Like what?" "Like my limp is invisible, like I'm beautiful?" He stood, moving around the desk without releasing her hand. "You are. Not despite your scars, but because of them. They're part of what makes you the woman who saved me." "You saved yourself," she corrected gently. "I just reminded you how." Graham reached out with his free hand, touching her cheek with a reverence that made her breath catch. "No, you did so much more than that. You showed me that grief doesn't have to be a life sentence, that healing isn't just about the body." His voice roughened. "That love can come again, even when you think your heart is too scarred to feel it." The word hung in the air between them, love, finally spoken after weeks of growing closer. Lena felt tears threatening and blinked them back. "I never meant to fall in love with you," she whispered. "I came here to be your caretaker, your friend, at most, and instead you became my miracle." She reached up, covering his hand on her cheek with her own. "Not because you survived, but because you taught me that broken things can become beautiful again." He drew her up gently, mindful of her leg, until they stood face to face. Outside, the sun broke through clouds, casting golden light across them both. In that moment, they were no longer caretaker and patient, no longer defined by their wounds or their pasts. They were simply two people who had found healing in each other's broken places. "Bradley and his conspirators won't know what hit them," Graham said softly, his forehead resting against hers. "They thought they were dealing with a dying man and his convenient bride." Lena smiled. "Instead, they're facing a partnership." "More than that," he murmured. And finally, after all the weeks of growing closer, he kissed her. The threatening letters arrived with the morning mail, their messages blunt and ugly. "Leave now, while you can still walk away," read one. "Some brides don't live long enough to inherit," warned another. Graham's hands shook with rage as he read them, but Lena noticed something else. No trace of the cough that would have consumed him weeks ago. "They're desperate," she said, sorting through the pile. "Bradley must have realized his clerk talked to me. This ends now." Graham's voice carried the steel of the rancher he'd once been. "I won't have them threatening you." "What they don't understand," Lena replied, moving to stand beside him at his desk, "is that I've faced worse than paper threats. The same town gossips writing these letters once told my father no one would ever marry his crippled daughter." Graham's arm slipped around her waist, pulling her close. "Fools." "Yes, well, those fools taught me something valuable." She leaned into him, drawing and giving strength. "They taught me that other people's fear of difference, of weakness, reveals more about them than it does about us." A knock at the study door interrupted them. Cooper entered, his weathered face grave. "Mr. Cade, there's trouble. Bradley and Dr. Simmons are in town talking to Judge Harrison. They're—" He hesitated, glancing at Lena. "Speak freely, Cooper." "Mrs. Cade. And I have no secrets." "They're saying she's been poisoning you, sir. Small doses to keep you dependent. They're calling her treatments witch's brews and claiming she's manipulating you to take control of the ranch." Instead of the fear they expected, Lena laughed. Softly. "Of course. They can't face the truth, that a man they wrote off as dying could recover, that a woman they see as broken could be the one to help him." Graham pressed a kiss to her temple, then turned to Cooper. "Get word to our lawyer and send someone to watch Bradley's office. I want to know everyone he meets with." "Already done, sir. The ranch hands, we've been keeping eyes on things. After all you and Mrs. Cade have done." Cooper straightened. "We're with you, all of us." After he left, Graham pulled Lena closer. "I should have known they wouldn't give up easily. The ranch, the lands they've stolen, it's worth a fortune." "They don't know what true fortune is," Lena said quietly. "They see only money and power. They don't understand that real wealth lies in healing, in finding purpose again." She touched his face. "In love. When did you get so wise?" "Around the same time you started believing in miracles again." His expression softened as he looked at her, this woman who'd walked into his life expecting to ease his death and instead had helped him embrace life again. "I've been thinking about Catherine's roses." "Oh?" "She always said a garden needs both thorns and blooms. The thorns protect, while the blooms remind us why we fight." He picked up one of the threatening letters. "These people, they're just thorns. But you showed me the blooms again." Lena's eyes glistened. "And you showed me that a limp doesn't make you weak, any more than grief makes you worthless." Outside, they could hear the ranch hands going about their day, their voices carrying a new energy that had been missing in the years of Graham's illness. The ranch itself seemed to be awakening, shaking off its long dormancy. "Bradley and his cohorts," Graham said thoughtfully. They've only ever torn things down, stolen what others built. But you and I, we know how to rebuild," Lena finished. "How to take broken things and make them whole again." He gathered the threatening letters and dropped them in the fireplace, watching them curl and blacken. Let them come then, let them bring their accusations and their lies. He turned to her, his eyes bright with purpose. "We'll show them what real strength looks like." Lena gripped her cane, standing tall beside him. Together. The word hung in the air like a promise, like a challenge to all who would stand against. Them. They had both known darkness, him in his grief, her in her injury. But standing there, facing the gathering storm, they were no longer defined by their wounds. They were defined by their healing, by their love, by their shared understanding that the greatest victories often come from the deepest battles, and they were ready to fight. The sworn testimony sat on Judge Harrison's desk, Cooper's honest handwriting laying out the truth of Graham's transformation. "I've worked Cade Ranch for 15 years, it read. "I watched Mr. Cade waste away after Mrs. Catherine died, and I've watched him come back to life under Mrs. Lena's care. There's no witchcraft here, just the kind of healing that comes from someone finally caring enough to fight for him." The judge's chambers were crowded that morning. Bradley and Dr. Simmons stood with their lawyer, their faces dark with barely contained fury. Graham sat straight-backed in his chair, every inch the powerful rancher he'd once been, while Lena kept her hand steady on her cane beside him. "These accusations are absurd," Bradley's lawyer declared, waving a stack of papers. "Mr. Cade was diagnosed with terminal consumption, his miraculous recovery under this. This woman's influence is highly suspicious." "Suspicious?" Graham's voice cut through the room like a blade. "The only suspicious activity here is how parcels of my land have been mysteriously selling while I was ill. Land deals I never signed." Before Bradley's face reddened. "You were dying. Someone had to manage." "I wasn't dying." Graham stood, his strength evident in every movement. "I was grieving. There's a difference, one that vultures like you took advantage of." Dr. Simmons stepped forward. "Your condition was terminal. I stake my professional reputation." "Your reputation?" Lena spoke for the first time, her voice quiet but carrying. "The same reputation that led you to declare 3 of my previous patients terminal, all of whom lived years after your pronouncement." She turned to the judge. "I have documentation of each case, Your Honor, along with records of certain payments made to the doctor's account by Mr. Bradley's bank." The color drained from Simmons's face. Judge Harrison leaned forward, suddenly alert. "Payments? Regular ones," Lena continued, coinciding with each diagnosis that kept Graham isolated from his business affairs. "This is outrageous," Bradley sputtered. "She's trying to divert attention from her own suspicious behavior. Those herbs, those treatments, you mean these?" Lena opened her medical journal, revealing pressed herbs and detailed notes. "Willow bark for fever, thyme for coughs, chamomile for sleep, all documented, all well-known remedies. Would you like me to continue listing their properties, Mr. Bradley? Or shall we discuss instead the forged signatures on land deeds?" The key. Judge studied the evidence before him. Cooper's testimony, the medical records, the banking statements that Graham's lawyer had quietly gathered. But more than that, he studied Graham himself, seeing not a dying man under some witch's spell, but a rancher restored to his full strength. "I've known Graham Cade for 20 years, the judge said finally. "Watched him build this ranch with Catherine, watched him nearly die with grief after her passing." He turned to Lena. "And I've watched you, Mrs. Cade, face the whispers in town, with dignity, tend to the dying when others turned away." He picked up Bradley's accusations and deliberately set them aside. "I see no evidence of manipulation here. What I do see is healing, of body, of spirit, and of a ranch too long neglected. And I see," he glanced meaningfully at Bradley and Simmons, "certain parties who seem uncomfortable with that healing. This isn't over," Bradley hissed as he stormed out, but his threat lacked conviction. After the others left, Graham drew Lena close, uncaring of who might see through the judges. "Window, you were magnificent." She smiled slightly. "We both were, though I suspect Bradley's right, this isn't over." "No," Graham agreed, "but they've shown their hand now, and we've shown our strength." The judge cleared his throat from his desk. "I knew Catherine, you know. She always said the ranch needed a strong heart to match its strong hands." He looked at Lena thoughtfully. "Seems she was right." Later, as they rode back to the ranch, Graham reached across to take Lena's hand. "I've been thinking about the south pasture again." "Oh, it needs a proper garden, bigger than the rose beds, something that could grow healing herbs." His eyes met hers. "Something that could help others the way you helped me." Lena's heart swelled with love for this man, who understood that healing wasn't just about their own story anymore. It was about creating something lasting, something that could help others find their way back to life. "Together," she asked. "Always," he promised. And in that word lay all their shared battles, victories, and dreams yet to come. Their marriage certificate hung framed in Graham's study now, no longer just a document of convenience, but a testament to something deeper. In the late afternoon light, Lena traced their names with her finger, remembering the desperate circumstances that had brought them together. The sound of approaching hoofbeats drew her attention to the window. Bradley was riding up to the house, alone this time. Graham entered the study just as Lena spotted their unwelcome visitor. Cooper sent word he was heading this way. He moved to stand beside her, his hand finding its familiar place at the small of her back. "You don't have to stay for this." "Yes, I do." She straightened, gripping her cane. "Whatever he's come to say, we face it together." Bradley's face was composed when Mrs. Torres showed him in, but his eyes burned with barely contained emotion. He carried a leather portfolio that he placed carefully on Graham's desk. "I've come to make you an offer," he said without preamble, "one that could benefit everyone." Graham's expression remained neutral. "Speak your piece." Bradley opened the portfolio, revealing a stack of legal documents. "Full ownership of the parcels I acquired, all of them returned to you with no questions asked, plus a considerable sum to cover any inconvenience." "In exchange for?" Lena asked quietly. Bradley's gaze shifted to her, calculating. "A simple annulment. You leave, take the money, start fresh somewhere else. No one needs to know about the treatments you used. Your reputation remains intact." The suggestion hung in the air like poison. Graham's hand tightened at Lena's back, but before he could speak, she took a step forward. "My reputation." She gave a soft laugh that held no humor. "Mr. Bradley, you still don't understand. My reputation was built on healing, on bringing comfort to the dying. But with Graham," she turned to look at her husband, love clear in her eyes. "With Graham I found something I never knew I was missing, something no amount of money could replace." "Don't be a fool," Bradley snapped. "You came here as a nurse, nothing more. A convenient bride for a dying man. Now you have the chance to leave wealthy, independent." "She's not going anywhere." Graham's voice was deadly quiet. "And you're done trying to manipulate what's mine." "Yours?" Bradley laughed harshly. "The ranch? The lands?" "My wife." Graham moved to stand beside Lena, their shoulders touching. "My partner. My heart." Bradley's facade cracked, revealing the ugly truth beneath. "She's a cripple, a nobody who tends to dying old men, and you were supposed to be one of them. Everything was arranged. The doctor, the diagnosis, your slow decline while we managed your affairs." He caught himself, but too late. "Thank you, Mr. Bradley," Lena said calmly, "for finally speaking the truth." Graham smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Cooper, you can come in now." The door opened, revealing not just Cooper, but Judge Harrison and the sheriff. They'd heard every word. Bradley's face went ash-gray. "You planned this." "No," Graham corrected. "We simply knew you couldn't resist one last attempt to destroy what you couldn't control." He looked at the sheriff. "I believe conspiracy and attempted fraud are serious charges, Sheriff." As they led Bradley away, Lena sank into Graham's chair. Suddenly drained, Graham knelt beside her, taking her hands in his. "I'd never have asked you to leave," he said quietly. "But if you wanted to, if any part of you wanted that freedom he offered—" She silenced him with a finger to his lips. "When I first came here, freedom meant not being bound to anyone, not being dependent." She cupped his cheek. "You taught me that real freedom is choosing to bind yourself to someone who sees all of you, scars, limps and all, and loves you, not in spite of them, but because of them. You gave me back my life," he whispered. "No," she smiled, tears gleaming in her eyes. "You gave me a life I never dared dream of, one where my differences aren't weaknesses to be pitied, but strengths to be celebrated." Graham drew her to her feet and into his arms. Outside they could hear the sheriff's wagon pulling away, taking with it the last threat to their happiness. But in that moment, they were focused only on each other. "The garden you wanted to plant," Lena said softly. "The one for healing herbs. What about it? I think it's time we started planning it, not just for the ranch, but for others who need hope, who need to see that broken things can become beautiful." Graham kissed her then, tender and fierce at once. When they parted, he pressed his forehead to hers. "I love you," he said simply, "not as my nurse, not as my convenient bride, but as the woman who taught me that the deepest healing comes from loving someone exactly as they are." In that moment, their marriage certificate seemed to glow in the fading light, no longer a mere document, but a testament to the power of choosing. Love over fear, healing over bitterness, and each other over everything else. The legal documents spread across the conference table at the bank told a damning story. Land deeds with forged signatures, backdated contracts, and carefully concealed money transfers, all leading back to a network larger than they'd imagined. Dr. Simmons sat ashen-faced at one end of the table, his lawyer whispering urgently in his ear. The bank president, Charles Morton, maintained his dignity despite the evidence before him, but his hands trembled slightly as he reached for his water glass. 15 years of theft, Graham said quietly, his voice carrying in the tense room, parcel by parcel, while I was lost in grief. Then a convenient diagnosis to keep me bedridden while you stripped away everything Catherine and I built. You were ill, Morton protested weakly. The arrangements were necessary to maintain your profits, Lena interrupted, her hand steady on her cane as she stood beside Graham. Did you think no one would notice? That grief and illness would blind him forever? Simmons broke first, as they'd expected. Morton orchestrated everything. The land deals, the false diagnosis. He said it was mercy, letting a grieving man fade away while protecting the ranch's assets. Protecting? Graham's laugh held no humor. You mean dividing them among yourselves? Morton's facade finally cracked. You were nothing but a shell after Catherine died. We did what was necessary to keep the ranch from dying with you. Then this woman, he gestured contemptuously at Lena, ruined everything with her folk remedies and false hope. False hope? Lena stepped forward, her quiet strength filling the room. Look at him, Mr. Morton. Look at what your mercy nearly destroyed. A man who built this ranch from nothing, who employed half the town, who created something lasting and beautiful with his wife. She smiled slightly. My only crime was believing he could do it again. The bank president flinched from her steady gaze. The ranch hands Graham had positioned outside the bank's windows were visible now, their presence a reminder that the town's loyalty had shifted. The ranch hands have signed statements, Graham continued, documenting every suspicious transaction, every forged document they were asked to deliver. Cooper's kept records for years, hoping I'd wake up enough to see the truth. And now, Morton's voice was barely a whisper, now you have a choice. Graham laid out a new set of documents. Sign these, confessing everything and returning all. Stolen properties, and we don't press charges. You'll leave town, of course, all of you, but you'll leave with your freedom, if not your reputations. And if we refuse, Lena touched Graham's arm gently. Then we let justice take its course. The judge has seen the evidence. The sheriff is waiting outside. But ask yourself, is it worth spending years in prison just to avoid admitting that you underestimated both of us? The silence stretched taut as a wire. Then Simmons reached for a pen with trembling fingers. She's right, he muttered. It's over. One by one they signed. Morton last of all, his carefully maintained dignity crumbling as he realized how completely they'd lost. As the sheriff led them out, Graham gathered the documents that would restore his ranch to wholeness. You were magnificent, he told Lena, softly. Catherine would have loved seeing you put them in their place. I learned from the best. She smiled up at him. A certain stubborn rancher who taught me that standing tall has nothing to do with how you walk. Outside, the afternoon. Sun gilded the town's main street. Townspeople gathered in small groups, watching as the sheriff's wagon carried away the men who'd nearly destroyed their community's largest employer. Cooper waited with their buggy, his weathered face bright with satisfaction. Ranch hands are. Waiting to hear from you, sir, he said as they approached. Figure it's time for a proper celebration. Graham helped Lena into the buggy, then turned to survey the town that had nearly buried him in grief and greed. Yes, he said thoughtfully, but not just for the ranch's recovery. He smiled at his wife. For its rebirth. For everything we're going to build together. As they rode home, Lena's head resting against his shoulder, the ranch spread out before them like a painting coming back to life. The south pasture where their healing garden would grow, the rose beds already blooming again, the fences being mended not just physically but in all the ways that mattered. We did it, Lena whispered. Graham kissed her temples softly. No, my love, we're just beginning. And in that moment, with the sun setting behind them and their future stretching out ahead, they both knew it was true. Every ending was just a new beginning in disguise. Every scar, every limp, every grief was just another way to learn how to heal. Not just themselves, but each other. And maybe, in time, anyone else who needed to believe in miracles again. Dr. Henderson studied the new medical records with undisguised amazement, his young face bright with curiosity. Unlike his predecessor, he approached Graham's recovery with genuine interest rather than suspicion. Remarkable, he murmured, reviewing the progression of symptoms and treatments. Your methods, Mrs. Cade, they're far more sophisticated than simple folk medicine. Lena sat beside Graham in the doctor's office, her medical journal open on her. Ud lap. My father taught me that healing isn't just about treating symptoms. It's about understanding the whole person, body, mind, and spirit. And love, Graham added softly, covering her hand with his. Don't forget that part. The doctor's final report made it official. Graham Cade was fully recovered. The document would be filed with the county records, a permanent testament to what many had deemed impossible. But for Lena and Graham, it was simply confirmation of what they'd known for months. The ranch hands are waiting, Graham said as they left the doctor's office. Indeed, a small crowd had gathered, Cooper at their head. The news spread quickly through the town square. The miracle of Cade Ranch was now a matter of medical record. Told you she was an angel, Cooper announced proudly to anyone who would listen. Saw it the first day she arrived. Lena blushed at the praise, but Graham just pulled her closer. More than an angel, he corrected. A warrior. My warrior. The celebration at the ranch that evening had been Cooper's idea, but the whole community embraced it. Tables groaned with food, brought by neighboring ranches. Children played in the rose garden, now fully restored to its former glory. Music and laughter filled the air, replacing the heavy silence that had shrouded the property for so long. Mrs. Torres had outdone herself decorating the main house, with help from town ladies who once whispered suspicions, but now sought Lena's friendship. The story of their triumph over Bradley and his conspirators had transformed town opinion. Where once they saw a suspicious arrangement between a dying man and his caretaker bride, they now saw a love story powerful enough to overcome both illness and betrayal. Look at them all, Lena marveled, watching from the porch as families mingled, sharing food and stories. A year ago, most of them wouldn't meet my eyes in town. Graham nuzzled her hair. A year ago, I couldn't walk to this porch. Amazing what? Love can heal, isn't it? She turned in his arms, studying his face, healthy now, filled with life and purpose. Do you ever miss it? The quiet, I mean. It's quite a change having the ranch so full of life again. I missed life itself for 15 years after Catherine died. Wrapped myself in silence and called it grief. He touched her cheek tenderly. You taught me that healing doesn't mean forgetting the past. It means building a future worthy of it. From the garden came the sound of children's laughter. They watched as little Sarah, the blacksmith's daughter, who walked with a brace, showed other children the herb garden Lena had started. This one's for fever, they heard her explain proudly. Mrs. Cade says everyone can heal something if they learn how. Tears sparked in Lena's eyes. I never thought, when I first came here, that you'd build something bigger than both of us? Graham smiled. The healing garden is just the beginning, my love. Think of how many others need to learn what we learned, that scars don't make us weaker, that grief doesn't have to be the end of the story. As if to emphasize his point, Cooper called for attention. The crowd gathered as he raised his glass. To Mr. and Mrs. Cade, who showed us that the strongest hearts are the ones that keep beating despite their scars. And to Cade Ranch, no longer just a cattle ranch, but a place of healing for anyone. Brave enough to believe in miracles. The cheer that went up seemed to touch the very sky. Lena leaned against Graham, feeling the strong, steady beat of his heart, the heart she'd helped heal, the heart that now held hers so carefully. Thank you, he whispered. For what? For limping into my life and teaching me how to walk tall. Again, she kissed him then, uncaring of their audience. Behind them the ranch stretched out under the setting sun, its buildings and fields no longer haunted by grief, but humming with new purpose. Their home, their future, their miracle. The ranch improvement plans covered Graham's desk, detailed drawings showing the transformation they envisioned. What had once been merely a cattle operation would become something more, a place of healing and hope. The old bunkhouse would be converted into additional rooms for those seeking recovery. The South Pasture's healing garden would expand, with greenhouses for year-round herbs. Catherine's rose garden would remain the heart of it all, a testament to love's ability to bloom. Again, Dr. Henderson wants to learn your methods, Graham said, watching Lena mark measurements on the plans. Says modern medicine could learn something from your whole-person approach to healing. Modern medicine could learn something from simply listening to patients, Lena replied, but she smiled. Though I suppose having a doctor's support will help convince people this isn't just folk medicine and false hope anymore. Graham came around the desk, drawing her into his arms. You never needed anyone's validation. You knew the truth all along, that healing comes in many forms. She relaxed against him, remembering how far they'd come. The first letter arrived today, she said softly. A rancher's wife from up north. Says her husband's lost himself to grief, just like you did. Wants to know if we can help. And? I wrote back yes. She turned to face him. Are you sure about this? Opening our home, our life, to strangers seeking healing? His laugh was tender. That's exactly how I found you, remember? A stranger who brought healing when I'd given up hope. He gestured to the plans. Besides, the ranch was always meant for more than just cattle. Catherine knew it. You helped me see it again. Outside, hammers rang as workers began converting the bunkhouse. Cooper had organized the renovation himself, proud to be part of their vision. The ranch hands had embraced the change, understanding that their work would now feed both bodies and souls. I had a letter myself, Graham continued more quietly, from Bradley's wife. Lena stilled. What did she want? To apologize, and to ask if we'd consider taking in their daughter for a while. His voice softened. Seems the girl's been sickly. Doctors can't help, and she heard about a certain miracle worker at Cade Ranch. Tears pricked Lena's eyes. Even after everything they did? You taught me that healing is about moving forward, not holding on to past hurts. He touched her cheek. What do you think? She studied the plans before them. The rooms they'd designed for healing, the gardens meant to nurture hope. I think that's exactly why we're doing this. Because everyone deserves a chance to heal, even the families of those who hurt us. Graham kissed her then, soft and sweet. Have I told you today how much I love you? Only 3 times. Her eyes sparkled. But I don't mind hearing it again. A knock at the door interrupted them. Mrs. Torres entered, her face bright with excitement. "The roses!" she exclaimed. "Come see!" They followed her to the garden, where Catherine's prized white roses had finally bloomed. But among them, something unexpected had appeared. A single red rose, its petals just opening to the sun. "In 15 years, these bushes have only ever bloomed white," Graham said wonderingly. "Catherine tried for years to grow red ones, but they never took." Lena squeezed his hand. "Maybe she's giving us her blessing for all of this." He drew her close, both of them gazing at the impossible rose. "No, my love, I think she knew all. Along that someday someone would come along and help new colors bloom in her garden." They stood there as the sun painted the sky in shades of promise, their dreams spread out before them in blueprints and blooms. The sound of construction mingled with birdsong, and in the distance they could see dust rising from cattle being moved to make room for the new healing gardens. "Cooper says people in town are already calling it Miracle Ranch," Lena mused. "They don't understand that the real miracle isn't in the healing," Graham replied. "It's in having the courage to believe in it, to fight for it." He kissed her temple. "To love again when you thought your heart was too scarred to try." The red rose caught the late afternoon light, its color deep and vital against the white blooms surrounding it. Like them, it was something new and beautiful growing from established roots, a testament to the truth they'd discovered together. That, sometimes, the most powerful healing comes not from erasing the past, but from using it to build something greater than anyone could have imagined. The joint will lay open on the lawyer's desk, its contents reflecting a vision larger than mere inheritance. "The Cade Ranch Healing Foundation," Graham read aloud, his voice warm with pride, "dedicated to providing hope and healing to those society deems broken or beyond help." Lena sat beside him, her medical journal, now expanded into 3 volumes, resting in her lap. 6 months had passed since they'd opened their doors to others seeking healing, and already the stories of recovery had begun to fill these pages. Not just physical healing, but the deeper kind that came from being truly seen, truly valued. "You're sure about this?" their lawyer asked, though his smile suggested he already knew the answer. "Converting most of the ranch's profits to support the foundation? Catherine always said wealth was meant to build something meaningful," Graham replied, taking Lena's hand. "And thanks to my wife, I finally understand what that meaning is." The first success story had been Bradley's daughter, Emily. She'd arrived thin and pale, her mysterious ailment confounding city doctors. Within weeks of working in the healing gardens with Lena, of learning to grow things and believe in renewal, color had returned to her cheeks. She'd left 2 months later with both health and purpose, determined to study medicine and combine modern science with the healing wisdom she'd learned at the ranch. "The documentation is ready for the medical training program as well," the lawyer continued, presenting another document. "Dr. Henderson is quite excited about overseeing it. This had been Lena's idea, creating a formal program to teach other caregivers their integrated approach to healing. Because sometimes," she'd explained to Graham, "the most powerful medicine is simply showing someone they're worth fighting for." Outside the lawyer's office, autumn painted the town in gold and crimson. The same streets that had once echoed with whispers about the limping bride and the dying rancher now carried different stories. Tales of the veteran who'd found peace tending the herb gardens, the grieving widow who discovered new purpose, helping others heal, the children who learned that different didn't mean broken. "I've been thinking," Graham said as they drove home, the ranch's expanded buildings visible in the distance. About that day you first arrived. Oh? Lena adjusted her shawl against the crisp air. What about it? I was so certain I was dying, so ready to just fade away. He glanced at her, love clear in his eyes. But you saw something else, didn't you, even then? She smiled, remembering. I saw a man whose heart was still fighting, even if he didn't know it, who needed someone to remind him that grief isn't the end of the story. You did more than remind me. He helped her down from the buggy, drawing her close. You showed me that sometimes our deepest wounds become our greatest gifts. The truth of that was evident all around them. The main house now hosted weekly gatherings where people shared their stories of healing and hope. The bunkhouse-turned-recovery rooms were full of those seeking their own miracles. The healing gardens had expanded beyond the south pasture, their harvest helping both body and soul. They walked arm in arm to Catherine's rose garden, now the heart of their healing center. The impossible red rose had multiplied, creating a beautiful blend of white and red blooms that drew visitors from miles around. But it wasn't the flowers that brought healing. It was the stories shared here, the tears shed, the laughter that gradually returned to wounded souls. Got another letter today, Graham said softly, from a rancher up north. Says his wife was thrown from a horse, walks with a limp now. Says she's lost her spirit, thinks she's less than she was. Lena leaned into him, understanding. And what? Did you tell him? Told him I knew someone who could help her see that strength isn't about how you walk. He kissed her temple. It's about how you help others find their way. As evening approached, they could see lights coming on in the recovery rooms, hear distant laughter from the community dinner being prepared. Mrs. Torres supervised a group of recovering patients helping in the kitchen, believing as they did that healing came through purpose and connection. Sometimes, Lena mused, I wonder what Catherine would think of all this, of how her rose garden has become a place of such healing. Graham was quiet for a moment, then said, I think she knew, somehow, that love doesn't end with loss. It just waits for the right moment to bloom again. In new ways, new colors. The lawyer's documents, safely stored in Graham's desk, would ensure their work continued for generations. But their real legacy wasn't in legal papers or property deeds. It was in every person who found healing at Cade Ranch, who learned that their scars made them stronger, who discovered that miracles often came disguised as challenges. It was in the truth they'd learned together, that sometimes the greatest healing comes not from being cured, but from being loved exactly as you are. The new family portrait hung in the ranch house entryway, catching the morning light. In it, Lena and Graham stood among the red and white roses, their faces bright with joy and purpose. But they weren't alone in the image. Surrounding them were the people who'd become their extended family, Cooper and Mrs. Torres, Dr. Henderson, the ranch hands and healing center staff, and several recovering patients who'd chosen to stay on and help others. It's perfect, Emily Bradley said, studying the portrait as she prepared to leave after her monthly visit. Now, in medical school, she returned regularly to help combine modern medicine with Lena's healing wisdom. Though it's missing something. Oh? Lena adjusted her cane, watching the young woman who'd become like a daughter to them. Hope, Emily said simply. You can see it in everyone's eyes, but you can't capture it in a picture. That's something people have to experience for themselves. Graham appeared in the doorway, his face lighting up at the sight of his wife. Speaking of hope, Dr. Henderson's newest patient just arrived. I think you'll want to meet this one personally, love. They made their way to the garden, where a woman stood hesitantly among the roses. She carried a cane, much like Lena's, and her face bore the same shadow of someone expecting judgment rather than acceptance. Mrs. Reynolds. Lena stepped forward. I'm Lena Cade. Welcome to our home. The woman's eyes darted between Lena's cane and her confident stance. You're the healer, but they said that I was damaged, broken. Lena smiled gently. Sometimes our greatest wounds become our greatest gifts. They teach us how to help others heal. Tears spilled down Mrs. Reynolds' cheeks. My husband says I'm not the woman he married. Since the accident. No, Lena agreed softly. You're not. You're stronger. You've learned things about survival that most people never have to face. The question is, what will you do with that? Strength? Graham watched from the porch as his wife led their newest guest toward the healing gardens, their matched limps creating a rhythm that spoke not of weakness, but of perseverance. He remembered his own journey, from a man waiting to die to one who'd found new purpose in helping others live fully. Mrs. Torres appeared at his elbow, wiping her hands on her apron. Dinner will be ready soon. The recovery rooms are full tonight. Good. Graham smiled. The more full, the more healing. Did you tell her yet? Mrs. Torres asked, her eyes twinkling. About the letter from the medical board? Tonight, he promised. The state medical board's official recognition of their healing. Center's methods would open doors for more people to find help. But more than that, it validated what Lena had always known. The true healing came from treating the whole person, not just their ailments. The evening brought their extended family together in the main house. Recovery room residents mixed with ranch hands, sharing stories and hope over Mrs. Torres' cooking. Emily sat with Dr. Henderson, deep in discussion about integrating traditional healing with her medical studies. Cooper entertained children from the families staying with them, his weathered face soft as he taught them about caring for the horses. Standing in the doorway, Graham pulled Lena close. Do you remember, he murmured, when you first arrived? How quiet this house was? How lost you were, she added softly. How alone I felt. And now look at us. He gestured to the vibrant scene before them, a limping bride and a dying rancher building miracles together. Lena turned in his arms, her eyes bright with tears and joy. The real miracle was learning that love doesn't see limitations, it sees possibilities. From the garden drifted the scent of roses, white and red blooming together like hope and healing intertwined. The sound of laughter and shared stories filled the once silent halls. Where grief had lived, joy now made its home. Catherine would be proud, Lena said softly, of all of this, of you, of us, Graham corrected, kissing her tenderly. This is our story now. Every life touched, every soul healed, every heart open to new possibilities. As night fell over Cade Ranch, lights glowed warm in the recovery rooms. In the garden, the roses stood testament to love's ability to bloom again. And in the main house, two people who'd once thought themselves broken beyond repair held each other close, knowing that their greatest weakness had become their greatest strength. For in the end, their story wasn't just about healing. It was about the miracle of two wounded souls finding wholeness in each other, and then sharing that miracle with everyone who needed to believe in second chances.